Hello, good evening, and welcome to the LFC Daytrippers. I am Gav. With me, I have Grizz, I have Ben, and I have Harry. Sophie from the United stand will join us in a little bit. A couple of minutes. She's doing a little bit of work after the United game. On tonight's show, we want to discuss obviously Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, United, and we might do a little bit of Liverpool as well while we're at it. This show, of course, is brought to you by Paddy Power. A bookie's a website and an app. If you gamble, please gamble responsibly and remember to do so with Paddy Power. I'm going to start with Arsenal, and Harry, that means I'm going to come to you first. Just your thoughts overall on the season so far. I know it's a disappointment. I know you have a cup semi-final coming up, but overall it has to be a disappointment, the change of manager and stuff like that. But how do you think it's gone? And I suppose, what's your outlook as well?
Oh, well, in terms of the way the season's gone, you're absolutely right. It's been a really, really disappointing campaign from an Arsenal perspective. Having gone so close to making the top four last season and obviously losing in the Europa League final, we felt like we weren't too far away from where we needed to be. But obviously the season started again and Unai Emery just completely lost his way as the Arsenal boss. And Grizz and Ben will tell you, I've never really been a huge fan of Unai Emery's. I thought that he was, too.
That's putting it politely, Harry.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
way too polite for you.
I just found him really like he didn't have a plan. He didn't have an idea. He didn't have an identity in mind of what he wanted the team to be. And that uncertainty almost filtered through into the team. You saw different formations. You saw different personnel. You saw fallouts with key players. You saw indecision around the captaincy, which eventually led to Granit Xhaka being voted the captain by his teammates. And then we saw what happened with that. So I just felt like there was always indecision. There was a lack of communication under Unai Emery as well. And when he was sacked, I thought that actually it came a little bit too late. Moving on, of course, Freddie Ljungberg came in for a little bit as an interim boss. It was always going to be difficult. And we know that Arsenal stripped the coaching staff when Unai Emery left down to the bare minimum until somebody else came in. And that was a problem for Freddie Ljungberg. He was out of his depth as it was, but he also had no staff to work with, and he kept making that public. He kept complaining about it. And then Mikel Arteta comes in, and I've actually been really, really impressed by what we've seen from Mikel Arteta so far. But unfortunately, the damage in regards to this season was already done. And it's just been since then about building for next season and trying to implement an identity, a style of play, trying to improve some of the players individually, the attitude of the team. And I've been really, really impressed by what I've seen from him. So I'm positive, but, it has been a disappointing season. I'm not going to lie to you. I can't wait till it's over.
Just going back on Unai Emery and he didn't have a plan and there was, communication and stuff like that. Would you throw any of that blame at the owner's door? Because there's been a lot going around about Arsenal's owners and the way they've gone on and the way they act. Could it be in a case that Unai Emery had a plan and put it to them when he was coming in to take over at Arsenal, and he was told or made promises that weren't kept? Is there a chance that that's the case?
Yeah, there is a chance that was the case, but Unai Emery never had that. And again, I don't want to make too much of a big thing about the communication stuff because it was largely actually down to the language barrier, but I just felt like he could have helped himself in terms of having someone by his side or using, one of the Spanish speaking players maybe as a bit of a mouthpiece for him in the media. And he never did that. He was always very adamant on facing the media. And then you were getting mixed messages, you were getting contradicting messages. And I think that filtered through onto the pitch as well, because there was a massive problem in terms of players understanding what they were trying to do. The owners of Arsenal haven't been great. They haven't been ideal, but they have spent money over the last few years. That's the one thing you can't really say about them. I think they got it wrong with Unai Emery. I think appointing somebody after Arsene Wenger was always going to be a really, really difficult task. I think they got it wrong. But to lay it all at their door, I think is unfair because they did act pretty quickly on Unai Emery. He didn't last very much longer after things sort of started going south. So at least they were decisive. At least they took action. They're not everybody's cup of tea. They're not necessarily my cup of tea, but I think Unai Emery was probably I guess the architect of his downfall rather than them, I would say.
Okay. Ben, you support Spurs, so I'm going to let you have first go at Arsenal. Uh, but no, looking across North London at Arsenal, and it's probably easy to answer this question because you're about around the same spot in the league at the moment. I think the one place separates you, if I'm right, if I remember right from looking earlier. But looking at Arsenal, what do you make of them? Do you agree with Harry there with Unai Emery, the making of his own downfall and stuff like that?
Yeah, to some extent. I guess the overriding feeling for me is when you look at Arsenal, it makes you all too aware of just how long this season has been. Because Emery feels like a lifetime ago to me.
Yeah,
like
he does.
it feels like so long ago in terms of when the things that Harry was discussing there. It just kind of had to jog my memory a little bit. The idea of him coming out to face the media and giving the same rhetoric week after week after week to the press. And I mean, I'll be honest. I think that my view of Emery was somewhat skewed by the fact that Harry and I spend a lot of time together talking about Arsenal on shows. So over the course of time, I got to see the kind of disengagement and disenfranchisement that Arsenal fans were starting to have with their team. But having said that, now looking at the way that Arteta has started to bring that back and seeing the kind of pride that people are starting to take in the version of Arsenal that's playing right now, I think it's almost like you can write this season off. Everything that happened before restart kind of sort of fades into insignificance, because really we're all looking ahead to the season was over for Arsenal around Christmas. We're all looking ahead really to what they're going to do next season. And weirdly, even though it's a season that a lot of people would probably say has been quite disappointing, it's one that you're ending with a quite strangely optimistic and upbeat feel to. If I don't want to speak on Harry's behalf, but it certainly feels that way looking at Arsenal fans, is that given the way that he sort of moved things on and turned things around, it feels like Arsenal fans are ending this season quite optimistically, even though they're not going to finish in the Champions League places.
Yeah, it's a fair point. They have picked up since Arteta. Grizz, Unai Emery never looked like the right fit for me for Arsenal. I'm being honest with you. I don't think he was. Wenger was a huge character without being massively outspoken. He was a huge character for Arsenal for 25 odd years or whatever it was he was at the club. Unai Emery seemed a bit, although Harry says he was determined to come out in front of the media at all times, and Harry's probably right. He probably did need someone that was a bit of a mouthpiece for him, even within the squad or, media circles close to Arsenal. You see it all the time at United, Liverpool. You always have someone in the media that's a bit of a mouthpiece for the club, and they do the job for the manager at times. He wasn't the right fit. Arteta does look like he could be because he understands the club. He's had a great education in football. But when you look at this season overall for Arsenal, is it one you just say, look, you just need to write this off because somebody says there the best thing they can do is not get European football and let him bed in completely next season? Where would you go with that?
Well, to start off with, I was very wrong about Emery. I thought he was just a disciplinarian, the guy that would sort of sort out this dressing room, sort of no more mavericks, no more mucking about in training. I really thought the guy came with a top pedigree. I know he didn't have the best of times at PSG, but what a manager he was at Seville. I just think there was a massive... I just think there was too many sort of fires to put out in that Arsenal dressing room in terms of egos and personality clashes, and they won. Usually the dressing room does win, but that's only if the board is weak. And I think even Harry will admit, and most people will say, that the Arsenal board are very weak. They just didn't back him enough. Of course, I get all the mistakes Emery made. And it's interesting that Harry mentioned about his sort of language and sort of his English wasn't great. And sometimes I would cringe for Emery, like when he was speaking in press conferences and sort of trying to communicate through media. And I thought that was a mistake on just Arsenal as a club not protecting him or having an interpreter or insisting on a translator. Do you know what I mean? So I just think that once you sort of clash with certain personalities in that Arsenal dressing room, that he look, he knew he had to fix them, but he wasn't given the backing. In my opinion, looking from an outsider, it seemed that way. I thought he was the right man to sort of discipline them. But, and we've discussed this before as well, and Harry's massive on sort of the playing style that's expected at Arsenal. And Emre wasn't sort of what they expected in terms of playing style. Arteta's again. I think Arteta's the right man for them. I've changed opinions now. I think Arteta's the guy that's going to sort of, and for the reasons that you've said, he knows the system, he knows the Premier League, which is usually very vital. He's come in and you can see an identity very quickly, and he has reverted to sort of giving a lot of the youngsters a chance. And it just bodes well. You're right. I mean, this is, as I think Ben said, it's a free hit for them for the rest of the season. Just bed in, create an identity again, and work your way forward. The only downside is I'm not sure if Arsenal would have spent anyway, but any hope they had of spending, this global pandemic has sort of taken that away from them as well. So it's going to be a bit of a rocky patch for him, but I definitely think they've got the right man at the helm now.
I've said on numerous occasions this season that I'm not an Arsenal fan by any means, but they are the most frustrating football club I have seen in a very, very, very long time. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. You look at what they have, the infrastructure they have, the stadium they have, and some of the players they have. And I used to get upset when I'd see Arsenal and what they were doing week on week. Genuinely, I'd be watching things going, is this actually for real? And I think it was the mix of what they were trying to do on the pitch and the reaction of people off it. Grizz, you've touched on the style of play and stuff like that. The style of play that Arsenal have tried to play over the last 15 years has not been good for Arsenal. It's been nice, but it hasn't been good, and it hasn't led to success for them. That kind of way. Couple that with Wenger being there, in my opinion, way too long. He should have been gone years ago. It wasn't a good mix. I like Arteta. His education in the game is a big thing for me. And if they want to play some style of football that they think they should, I think he may be the man for it. But as you said, it is a bit of a free hit for them. I think they can still, they can get European football, can't they, with an FA Cup win, or maybe I think 7th in the league will do it. So they still have a chance. I'm a bit torn on, should they get Europe, should they not? I don't think a Europa League for Arteta is the best way to start his first full season. That's being honest. But moving on to Spurs and the season they've had, and Ben, you had Pochettino. He gets beaten in the European Cup final last season. They come into this season, and it just doesn't feel right, does it, from day one?
Yeah, I guess so. I think emotionally, I mean, you guys know better than anyone, like emotionally how draining it is to lose a final like that. And the way in which you guys reacted was pretty much the best practice, right? And was kind of like the guideline for what you should do as a side that loses a Champions League final. I was there, so I mean, I can tell you it was absolutely rubbish. I mean, if you're a Tottenham fan, the low that you feel is like not like much else. And so we started out by doing the right things. You have to say, I mean, going out and getting hold of one of the best central midfielders in the world, or one of the most kind of like touted around central midfielders in the world, and Ndombele, Giovanni Lo Celso, another like really, really great signing. Ryan Sessegnon, very exciting young player, and for whatever reason it just didn't happen. And I think a lot of people have spoken about this at length, but the idea of trying to reignite a spark under a squad of people that have gone so far with a certain manager is a very, very difficult thing to do. And I mean, I know a lot of other people will be a lot more harsh than me about this and say like people lost the dressing room or whatever. I don't actually feel that way. I just think things reached a natural end. You do that many years with someone in charge of a club, eventually you either need a fresh supply of players or you need a fresh voice in order to change the dynamic. And it's clear what the decision was. And so I think you're right, mate. I think we started the season with a hangover, and and I think kind of understandably so. Like Spurs are not regularly in Champions League finals. We don't have a rich history with the Champions League, of being in that every other year. You know, that was a big deal for Spurs fans and for the players, and it took a lot to recover from.
Yeah, it's perfectly understandable. You know, in fairness, you know, we did lose a European Cup final in Kiev, and our reaction to it was exemplary, to be honest with you. And I don't know how many clubs have lost a European Cup final and come back the following season to win it. I don't know if there's that many, but to also do what we done in the league as well on top of that was exemplary. And it is hard to, you know, in fairness to Spurs, they were being measured against Liverpool's reaction from the very start. And
that's a very good point.
One kind of speed bump in the road, and it just humbles, you know, the kind of way. Grizz, the one thing about Pochettino was I rate him very, very highly. We had a conversation the other day about who would you like to be Liverpool's next manager. I would have no problem with Pochettino being Liverpool's next manager. The way he carries himself, the style of football he plays, I'd have no issue. People know that.
His passion.
Yeah, I think he seems to get himself ingrained in a club as well, which I like. You know, he's not a Mourinho type that comes in and just, you know, I'm here and I won't be here for that long and then I'll be gone. And we'll talk about him later. But Grizz, Pochettino made a comment before the Champions League final last year when he said if they won it, he probably just head off into the sunset. Was that turned out to be a killer comment, didn't it?
I think it was probably, I mean, Ben will know more. I think he probably knew inside at that stage that, you know, this is pretty much it. As good as it gets, probably. Because I think, well, most top clubs will have strategies in place from seasons before, especially in terms of investment and players. And as Ben said, it was either get new, fresh faces in or get a new, like, manager in. And, you know, we know which way Mr. Levy went, or usually does as well. He was no way going to spend money on players. But then saying that, they did sort of, as you said, buy, you know, 2-3 top players. But was it, I tried to ask Ben, were those signings sort of, were they made, have you got a sporting director or who made those signings? Do you think Pochettino had a lot of say in those signings?
Mate, it's really difficult to tell. Like, it's really difficult to tell because the messages that you got over the summer, like, I mean, on record, the messages that you got over the summer were from Pochettino saying something to effect, I believe, of "I'm the head coach. Refer to me as the head coach." You know,
Thank you. I remember that.
It was quite explicit. Yeah, yes. It was quite explicit in that. But that's also at the same time, I should caveat that with, like you said, Grizz, like, we made good signings. Like, we signed good players. You know, like that was a decent window.
Well, Symeou was one of the most sought out youngsters. Even we wanted him. So I thought that made sense for you guys, especially with Danny Rose. Lo Celso, an absolute cultured central midfielder, young as well. You all brought the right age, right profile. Everything seemed rosy. The only downside of that, I would say, is if they had a vision of Poch leaving, maybe they should have held fire in terms of spending that money and saving it for the next coach. And especially if that next coach was going to be Jose. Because we all know he's his own man. He hates going into places where he's got leftovers of other players, of other coaches. You know, he likes to build his own players, his own mentality in those players. So there's always going to be a bit of an issue there. Again, we talked about Arteta being the absolute fit for Arsenal. I just thought opposite of Jose and Spurs. I just thought, whoa, okay, this doesn't make sense from the start. I know hindsight and et cetera, but really, you know, Spurs are definitely used to playing in a certain way. They can't sort of revert back to saying, you know, we'd rather sacrifice playing style for trophies because they haven't had many trophies as well. So all they had was enjoyment of watching their team, glory, Tottenham Hotspur, you know, and everything. And they should have known that this man straight away is not going to be about that. I think, you know, I've said it, I think Danny Levy brought him in to win trophy, just to get that monkey off your back, sort of just to win something. Forget about sort of longevity and building a squad or building a team, because Jose Mourinho is not your man for that. But he's your man to sort of winning a trophy. And I think it's so important. I think Spurs win something, and then you could see sort of them sort of flourish and move levels up.
It could be like, we've seen it with Liverpool winning a title for the first time in 30 years, like, and it's a massive weight off a club's shoulders. It could be something like that for Spurs where, it could be just a League Cup, it could be an FA Cup, they do something and it just takes that weight off them and they can go forward and stuff like that. Harry, you clearly shit yourself in June of last year when Spurs were in the European Cup final, and that's perfectly understandable. But looking at them this season, are you surprised that, although, look, massive highs of getting to the Champions League final, massive lows, as Ben said, of losing that final, because as a team, they'd gone through all the phases to try to get where they were, although it was surprising that they got there, let's be honest about it. But when you were coming into the season, were you thinking Spurs could go again here and possibly be league contenders rather than chasing a Champions League?
I always think that the Champions League is as much as it's a wonderful competition and it's really, really difficult to win, it is a cup competition at the end of the day. And you don't need to be good consistently from August until May. With the Champions League, you can quite easily coast through a group where you're a seeded side and you get a couple of decent draws, and then you can get a decent draw. And I'm not saying that Spurs done it the easy way or anything. I'm not taking anything away from them, but it's a very different animal to the Premier League in terms of the level of consistency that you need to show to get far in it. I didn't think that Tottenham were going to be Premier League contenders. I've got to be honest. I thought, having watched last season, I didn't think anybody was going to get near Manchester City and Liverpool. And it turns out Manchester City couldn't even get near Liverpool this year. So I didn't see them as title contenders, but I was surprised to see it unravel the way it did. I think Ben was right when he said that things just came to a natural end. That happens sometimes. Cycles end. And unfortunately for Spurs, and for Maurizio Pochettino, it happened when it happened, and then people will say sort of like the Champions League final killed them. Actually, Spurs had been performing at a level of consistency that we'd probably never seen from them, and not in my lifetime anyway, under Maurizio Pochettino. Great coach, really, really well thought of. I do think at times tactically he was left wanting a little bit in certain games, and there's one game from Pochettino that always sticks in my head, and I think it was the season before last against Juventus in the Champions League at Wembley, where they made a couple of changes. I think it was Allegri at the time. He made two quick changes and Pochettino just failed to react to it, and then the game was turned on its head. And I still think that Pochettino, as good a coach as he is and as good a manager he is, I still think that he's still learning the tactical side of the game a little bit. I think he's a great coach in terms of developing people, in terms of having a style, in terms of getting the buy-in from his players. But I still don't put him in the very, very elite, because I don't think that he has the ability necessarily to win a game the way Jose does, for example, by making certain changes and making certain selections. Like Grizz, though, the appointment of Mourinho came as a massive shock to me, because he just is everything against what Spurs are. And even as an Arsenal fan, I could admit that, Spurs, they are a big club. They have a style, they have a history. And he comes in and it just felt to me like a safe option on Levy's part. You're going to get a certain level from Mourinho. You probably won't get anything more these days, but you definitely won't get anything less. It was just like a way to try and steady the ship, but it's probably going to prove a really expensive one, because I can't see him lasting there for the entire term of his contract, because I don't think the Spurs fans will have it. And I don't think that he's capable anymore of taking them sort of back into a position where they're closer to Manchester City and Liverpool again. So I think it was the wrong choice by Daniel Levy. And I think within the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to see that.
I'm being honest. I think Mourinho's appointment at Spurs was a little bit of a surprise, simply because Daniel Levy is known to be quite tight with, and now I say quite tight with money, and then we've just talked about 3 or 4 players that they've signed over the last year, but it doesn't seem to fit. Mourinho wants somebody a la Abramovich, or you're at Real Madrid, the kind of way United are an absolute money-making machine. Ben, the lads there don't see Mourinho lasting his term. He doesn't usually last his term. Let's be honest, 3 years is about max. But just before we move on to, what we see for the rest of the season, do you think Mourinho sees out 2, 3, 4 years at Spurs?
Well, the term of the contract, I think, is 3 years. So in terms of whether he'll do his contract, I actually imagine that he will. Like, I think you'll see now, realistically, like the aim and the ambition is to win a trophy. So he should be given a full season to go and try and win a trophy. And if he does that, I think, do you know what, mate? I think the real crux of this is a transition for the fan base. The fan base needs to move to a mentality. Like, you guys talk a lot about Liverpool being mentality monsters, and you talk Arsenal, for example, when they talk about the glory days of Arsenal, they talk about the idea of winning trophies and going out and being successful. At some point, you have to accept that, like, unless you win trophies, like, people are always going to question you. Like, there's no getting away from the fact that I adored watching Pochettino Spurs. Like, I enjoyed watching Tottenham play every single week for 4 years, and like, it's very rare that you can say that about your football team. But we were never going to be able to get rid of that constant sort of splinter in the back of everything that we did, which is people saying, "Well, what have you won? What have you got to show for it, silverware wise? What have these players that you've gathered and grown and turned into like top draw players, what have they got to show for it in the trophy cabinet?" So if Mourinho wins a trophy, Daniel Levy said it time and time again, he's here to win a trophy, like this is the time to do it. So if he does win a trophy, then I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. But I do think there's a very valid point there about the idea of it having to be different this time. That, particularly in current climate, Spurs can't go out and just spend hundreds of millions on buying the best players to come and do it. Like, it's got to be done differently. And I mean, as an optimistic Spurs fan, I'm hoping that it will be.
But the shocking thing is, right? It's exactly what you said, Ben. That you can't go out and spend hundreds of millions. Well, not many clubs can now, anyway. But knowing that, your board knowing that, Jose knowing that when he's coming into this job, that's why it makes it so strange. Like, Mourinho, we all know and we all class as someone who goes in there and literally needs to buy his own players, his trusted soldiers. It's a weird kind of marriage. I don't see how Levy thought that sort of this is going to work. Do you get what I mean? Like, he's not going to give him funds unless you sell Harry Kane, maybe.
I have a feeling that Spurs are the ones that are going to suffer the most from this pandemic. I think the mix there of, where are funds available, you'd have to question the stadium and the cost of the stadium, the move there. We've all seen that with Arsenal going back, it must be 15 years Arsenal are in the Emirates now. And then I just think they might be the ones that suffer the most, but we'll have to wait and see. Sophie has joined us, Manchester United fan Sophie. Extremely happy with the result tonight, I presume, Sophie?
I am, not with the performance as much, but the result, I'll take it, definitely. You good?
Yeah, good. And you've arrived at the perfect time. We've discussed Arsenal, we've discussed Spurs, so let's get on to Manchester United.
She's come at the perfect time because we've slagged off United while she was away. We haven't.
I've left United to last deliberately to give you the chance to come on here and have your say, because I wouldn't let Grizz just slaughter United and then not let you have a word back about it.
I've done enough today. Ben knows I've done enough today.
But Sophie, obviously it's going down to the last 2 games now with regards to Champions League. Chelsea, Leicester and Manchester United fighting it out for 2 spots. But just looking at the season overall, that's what we're trying to do in this part of the show. What have you made of Manchester United this season?
Topsy-turvy, up and down season. I think Bruno has obviously come in and I think he has transformed us. And a lot of people say, how can one player transform a team? But I think genuinely Bruno Fernandes has done that. I think the positive impact he's had around the club, the whole atmosphere, even players like Pogba look far more focused. And I just think that since he's come in, it seems like Ollie is finally getting the tools to do the job that he's obviously come to do. And I think that he has had such a positive impact that since that point, we've gone upwards. I know that we haven't played that well today, but I think there's still signs of progress. Like, there's so many times that we play against a team that sat in, we'd struggle. And I think that Bruno's obviously is the key to unlocking that.
Yeah, listen, there's no issue with not playing well and winning games. All the great teams have done it at some stage. It's actually a very good sign for Manchester United if they're playing not well and winning games, because United over the last couple of seasons have played not well and not won. So that difference there is massive already for me. Grizz, Manchester United, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took a lot of abuse towards the end of last season. People didn't think he'd make it through the summer, and then at one stage of the season, it looked like he was out the door as well. In fairness, Grizz, United going in 2 games to go in the season with still a real I'd still make them the favourites to be in the Champions League spot from the end of it.
Definitely.
I think you actually, and as a Liverpool fan, I have no problem saying this, I think you actually have to give them a fair bit of credit for being in that position, considering A, the squad they have, in my opinion, and B, as topsy-turvy as they've been, they've managed to put themselves in that position.
There's absolutely no doubt. I banter with a few United lads on social media.
No way.
And you know how you do.
Grizz is the banter king.
It's not like you.
But look, this is the real football man side of me talking. You have to give them credit. You have to give the manager credit. The guys come in. Even his own fan base sort of ridiculed him at the start, early days. It was almost a matter of when is Ole being replaced by Pochettino, not if. But he's managed to turn it around. They're still in the FA Cup, Europa League as well, and for me, dead on certs now for the top 4, which from the position they were is you have to say a magnificent achievement. So there's no doubt about it. He's handled the personalities really well. A lot of criticism that Ole got was, will he be able to handle the big boys, the Pogbas, the Martials, and incoming Fernandes? But he has. He seems to have got a good little unity going in between them, and look, fair play to them. They are very good to watch now as well, which was another criticism under Jose, that they became this very sort of, ununited. You couldn't recognize that this was United playing. Pretty much like watching Spurs now. I'm sorry, Ben, but, pretty much it's like watching Spurs now. It's like the Jose, the curses he carries with him, this sort of dour football. But now he's slowly opened them up into an attacking unit, and at the same time stopped them leaking goals at the back. I still, and I'll say it, this is not my banter style, but I still say whenever they come up against more than semi-decent opposition, they can be got at very easily. And there is sort of issues, but, every club has those issues, and I'm sure they know what they're targeting and what they're doing and where they need to invest. But look, from a point of view of when Ole came in and sort of his first few months to where they are now, wow, amazing. From a United point of view, it's definitely sort of on the way up again.
Yeah. Harry, I'll come to you on United. I've since they've come back off the break, and I suppose before the break as well, that they were in decent enough form. But since this break, they've really pushed on. They draw at Spurs, but I think have they won every other game since then, or they might have drawn. Did they draw the last game?
They drew with Southampton, didn't they?
They drew with Southampton. Yeah, they drew late with Southampton. But other than that, I think they've won everything else, bar those 2 draws. But Harry, is it a case, and we see this a lot thrown around the league year after year, is it a case of United, although not being at their best, have fallen upon something while the likes of Spurs and Arsenal have faltered, and they've managed to slip in there? Because Spurs or Arsenal at an extra 10% are probably, there's a five-way chase now for 2 places over the last 2 games. Have they just fallen on that little bit of luck as well, where other teams have fallen away and United have managed to slip in there, because they're on 62 points with 2 games to go? It looks like 60. It's a 62 points, yeah, I think it is, and it looks like 65ish will do it for Champions League, which is a low enough total.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because you don't want to take anything away from what they've done by putting it on the other clubs that perhaps have underperformed, because they can only beat what is in front of them, and they're doing that at this moment in time. But I've got concerns about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as well, and I had the concerns from when he got the job, and even after the sort of really good start, and then it started dipping again, and when they gave him the job on a permanent basis, I was a bit like, I'm not sure that's the right thing. I think that Bruno Fernandes has come in and has been immense, and you cannot underestimate what a difference one player has made to this team. It's incredible. Add to that Pogba's come back, and I think that for all the off-the-field issues that seem to be sort of surrounding him, or the controversy anyway that seems to surround him, I think he's a really, really fantastic player, and if you can get him going, then you're fine. Martial's sort of improving. Rashford has always been like of a decent standard, and what's going on at United at the moment is it feels like everything is clicking into place and it's all working. When Grizz said that he had concerns about how Ole would handle the dressing room, I actually never had concerns about that with regards to Ole. I think he's a really likable character, and I don't think that there'll ever be a problem in terms of his relationship with individual players. I think that's probably one of his strengths. But I do, similar to what I said about Pochettino, I do think that, and he's got some big results and some big games, to be fair to him, but I do think that at the moment he's given the group the freedom to go out and play the way they want to play and express themselves. He's kind of set them up in a way where they've got that midfield pivot, and then Bruno Fernandes can go out there and sort of dictate the play and has a bit of a free role. The problem is, though, that is enough to get you to a certain point, and they'll probably qualify for the Champions League. But then a club like Manchester United need to be at the very, very top. And two things I would worry about is, number one, does Ole Gunnar Solskjaer attract the same level of player that Klopp or Guardiola would attract? I know Manchester United are a huge club, but does Solskjaer have that selling point? I don't know. And second of all, it's when he comes into these big European ties, again, similarly to what I was saying about Mauricio Pochettino, has he got the ability to read a game quicker than his opponent and make a key change that could be the difference? I'm still not sure about those things. I'm not saying that he will never be that manager, but I still have reservations about that. And whilst we're giving Manchester United a lot of praise at the moment for where they are in the league and the run that they've been on, they're still a million miles away from where Manchester United should be, and we shouldn't forget that. So he deserves more time and see how he goes, but I do fear that at some point they may have to go for someone in a higher bracket of manager than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer if they want to get back to the very top. If you want to finish third or fourth, Ole's probably capable of that, but he still, for me, hasn't proven that he's that top bracket level manager.
Fair enough. I think a lot of that is hard to argue with, in fairness.
I
Ben,
think
would you like? Yeah, go on.
Sorry to interrupt. I think if you're looking at all his signings or who he's signed so far, obviously Wan-Bissaka, Maguire's come in. I know we spent a lot on him, but he has improved us defensively. I think every signing that he has made, Bruno Fernandes, they've all been positive additions. And I think when you look at the profile of the player he's going for, that's given us a lift in itself, because we've seen with the likes of Alexis Sanchez, we've signed players who are coming towards the end of the career. We don't need to go for that Galactico style big name. We don't need to do that. I want to look at players more like Robertson, for example, who signed for Liverpool from Hull. That's the kind of player I want to be looking at, players who we can build. And Ole needs, if he gets players who are too much of an ego, we've mentioned the dressing room, we don't want to upset the balance. At the moment, he's got that balance spot on. And I just hope that Ole does get a lot of say over the signings that he makes in the summer. I think another transfer window, and then obviously next season, and I think that's the time to judge him. But at the moment, he's still building. I'm just really positive and feeling really optimistic about the signings he's made so far, and excited to see who we can get in the summer. But definitely just the attraction and tactically as well, judging him, I get that, because he yet to prove himself tactically. Has he got what it takes to change in a big game? And I think we yet to see that. But I think he definitely earned the time.
See, I think, sorry to butt in, Gav, tactically, I know you're used to it. The rest of it, I'll just point it out.
It's right.
Tactically, Sophie touched on tactically, and Harry said is still yet to be convinced of him tactically. I think Ole in the big games has been fantastic.
So do I.
I think beating Pep, how many times, Sophie, has you beaten?
11 times this season, I think.
I don't think it's the big games we struggled in, though.
It's not the big games, though. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
But this is my point.
It's the games where we've got to break teams down. That's where we struggle.
Sure, but this is it. So it's a difficult one, because he has been proven to be very astute. Even against us, he knew how to stop us when we were flying. Obviously everyone beats us now. We're rubbish now. But
Yeah.
but back when we got the draw out,
should have null and voided it, Chris.
Null and voided it. Sake, man, we should null and voided it. But back then, Old Trafford, when we went to Old Trafford, he knew exactly how to give us a hard game. He's got a fantastic record against Arsenal, against City. So against the big boys, he has sort of handled himself very well. Yes, it's the lesser teams that sort of they've struggled against, whatever. But I think even that, I think this was pre-Bruno. They struggled. Since Bruno's been in there, they've been dispatching these 15th, 18th, 19th place teams. And I've taken the piss, but they've dispatched them. Do you know what I mean? So I think Ole's won a lot of fans over and will continue doing so.
Yeah, listen,
yeah.
He probably will, and it's probably a huge summer for United again because, Fernandez is a brilliant signing. He was the right signing in the position they needed it because United did look very, for me, one-dimensional. And then they looked like they had players that were playing in positions that they weren't too sure of. Switching Martial and Rashford around. It didn't work. To my eye, it didn't work. Whereas Bruno seems to have come in and basically says, I play this position, I'm really good at it, and you go off and play those positions and stop messing about, and we'd be quite good. And that's the very simplistic way I can put it, but it seems to have worked for them. Ben, just the last bit on United before we move on to the next piece. You look at, we've spoken about Mourinho and who leaves United and then goes to Spurs, and you see Ole Gunnar Solskjaer come in, and people thought it would be a quick fix and then they would appoint somebody, but they've stuck with him. There's definitely been an improvement, Ben, hasn't there? Because you speak to fans of all clubs probably 7 days a week, but there's definitely been an improvement in the way United have played, and I suppose an identity to what they're doing and what they're looking to do.
Yeah, one of the things you probably see more than anything at the moment is that they're removing a level of inconsistency that was there pre-Christmas. Like what you tended to see a lot pre-Christmas was United would win a couple of big games, everyone would get off Ole's back, and then they'd lose a couple of important games, and everyone would be back on his back. And it felt like the conversation and the narrative switched week to week, like Ole in, Ole out. My mind hasn't really changed. I don't think that Ole's become a world beater overnight. I don't think that just because he signed a player that a lot of us would have said is a very good player, that his actual managerial style has changed. I think what he's done is that he's freed a lot of people up in the sign of Bruno Fernandes. He said that we're going to put a leader in this team. It's going to take pressure off Pogba. It's going to take pressure off Rashford. It's going to take pressure off the front line just in general. I think they're playing feel-good football at the moment. I think they're playing on the front foot. They look hungry. They look like they're going to break teams down, which wasn't the case before. They were really struggling to break teams down. And I think they're being rewarded for staying loyal to Ole. And all I would say is, I think Harry made a very good point earlier, is to what extent will that loyalty be repaid with success in the future? Because I would argue that Ole will probably be able to get them so far. Whether he can get them into the top two in the league and go out and win a Champions League remains to be seen. I think the FA Cup would be a really, really good thing for United. If United could win the FA Cup and then get that hunger and that appetite back for silverware of a new manager, then that does a lot. But I would question whether Ole couldn't take them as far as something like a Premier League win or a Champions League win. Yeah,
listen, it all remains to be seen. And the reason I wanted to do this show tonight is because I think the circumstances that have been around this season, with some teams being, Liverpool have been the best by a mile, there's no doubt about that. Man City have been below par for me when you look at the squad, and the rest of them have kind of just hopped around and swapped places throughout without anybody standing out. But the thing around this season with COVID-19, a pandemic, and a massive loss of money to all clubs, regardless of how big you are, that this is uncharted territory for money loss for me. That the last couple of games of this season could not only define your summer or your next season, but possibly the next couple of years for your club, because it's that big for people. And I want to move on to that next. And Harry, I'll ask you straight out. Do you want Arsenal to win the last 2 games of the season and make, or an FA Cup and make Europa League?
I always want Arsenal to win. But I mean, I guess where the angle you're coming at is, do I want us to be in Europe? And in an ideal world, you don't want to be playing Thursday, Sunday. It's horrible. It means you play after everybody. It disrupts the routine. The games are too close together and you don't really have much preparation time. So it is a problem. However, the flip side is that, and I'm not saying this in a cocky or arrogant way, but the Premier League, the sort of high-end Premier League clubs, are often capable of getting to the knockout stages of the Europa League by playing a reserve team in the early stages. So I don't think it has that much impact at the start. But I guess you've got to look at it with a more long-term approach. And do I want Arsenal to play in the Europa League? To be honest, I'm not that bothered. But ultimately, it's another way of getting in the Champions League, which is key. And what it does is it frees up some finance. And I've been reading that Arsenal, when they got to the final, they ended up with around about 40 odd million pounds from it. And considering everything that's going on at the moment, the global pandemic, Arsenal not being in a particularly good financial state, then it's hard for me to sit here and say that I don't want us to earn that money, because I think it will cost us in the longer term, in terms of, if we can't go out this summer and we can't back Mikel Arteta to a certain degree within reason, then what was the point in bringing him in? You've got to want whatever means that Arsenal have the most resource available to them, because it's so clear that there are so many changes that are needed. And I worry that if we're not in Europe, then, it could be a real problem. About the FA Cup, of course, you want to win the FA Cup. As an Arsenal fan, it's a competition that is very close to my heart. It's a competition that Arsenal have won more than anybody else. It's a competition that we love. And I almost feel like I never want to see anyone else win it for that reason. Of course, we want to win it, though. And of course, if Mikel Arteta was able to get a trophy under his belt, just imagine what a sort of lift that would give the club, that he's come in, he's changed the culture, we're starting to pick up some better results, and then we get a trophy. It would kind of like be that little boost and that little kick that says to the players, yeah, you know what, this guy's come in and look, we're instantly better. Also might encourage the board to be more confident in what he can deliver in the longer term, and perhaps release more funds. We've heard Arsenal have been restructuring some of their debt over the past week or so in order to try and make a little bit more money available. It's not a great deal, but there'll be a little bit more available as a result, we hope. So look, you don't really want to play Thursday, Sunday, but at the end of the day, if it means we're going to have the resource, then yeah, I'd rather Arsenal qualify for it.
It's actually an interesting argument, because everyone looks at the Europa League as a bit of a hindrance, especially if you're used to being in the Champions League, or going after titles, or being regulars in the top 4. And it's looked upon as a bit of a hindrance, unless you get to the later stages where you're going, we're not having a great season in the league, we could win this and get into the Champions League. But now there could be an argument of, listen, needs must get in there, and it's going to plug some of that hole that's left after this coronavirus disappears, and the money is all shaken out, and seeing where everybody is, to look at it and go, as you said, 30-40 million at the end of this season feels like a hell of a lot more after what's gone on. Just quickly around to everyone, Grizz, do you feel Arsenal make Europa League this season?
I haven't looked at the table.
Do you want me to tell you the table, Grizz?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. The table as it stands at the moment has Arsenal in 9th place. They are 3 points off Wolves, who are on 56. 2 games to go, but 7th place looks like it will get a UEFA Cup spot as well.
So we're essentially 2 points off of Spurs in 7th.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if we don't win the FA Cup, then the 7th place becomes a Europa League spot. So
yeah, I think they make it. I've got faith in Arteta. I do like Arteta, and I like.
Who have Arsenal got left? Who are the playing?
We have got Villa and Watford, I believe.
Oh, good luck. Yeah, they're making it.
Yeah, they're making it.
Sophie obviously thinks they'll make it. I'm not too sure. Ben, do you think they make Europa League?
No way.
No, okay.
I think Villa's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, oh, go on, mate. Sorry.
I've seen Villa. Like, you think playing against Timo fighting to stay up, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. You can't just go into that complacent. But Villa today have had another disappointing result. They got a goal off their head, but they just can't seem to stay in the league for long against anything they're playing against. They seem to concede goals and they don't create a lot. So I just think that Arsenal momentum is with them at the minute. I think Watford will be a tricky game for them though, but I think they might just scrape it.
Okay.
You got to think as well. Watford could be safe by the time we play.
Yeah.
And it's at the Emirates as well. So there's that as well.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Ben, on Spurs, you know, Spurs are in the shake for Europa League as well. Is that something that you want to see Spurs in next season? Are you happy enough for them to go into Europa League and take it from there, everything considered?
Yeah, 100%. Harry, I mean, I think Harry barely scratched the surface there in terms of the actual financial value that European football brings you. If you like, I mean, at this time, anyone that is sneering towards the idea of the revenue that it brings and the ability to be involved in European competition and take another route into the Champions League or even win silverware is just, yeah, like it's not something I can get on board with. Like if it was a choice between no European football or Europa League, 100% Europa League. Like I think that should be the case for every team in the Prem. Like there should, like, for me anyway, it just feels like there's no real discussion around that. And I understand people who might say that, like, yeah, you might perform better in the league without it, but we're at a time where right now teams are going to have such limited resource to spend on transfers, and we're sitting here talking about the sort of players that you might need to improve the side. Like, European football is an essential for me.
Yeah, listen, there is always an argument that it affects your league performance, which is mad to me. I don't know why playing Wednesday, Saturday, or Thursday, Sunday should not make a difference to a professional footballer. And if you know, do what you used to do years ago and not look at the results from the day before. So you know, so you didn't know the scores when you start watching match of the day. It makes no sense to me. You're playing 2 games in a week. It doesn't matter what day they land on. But moving on, and Manchester United, Sophie, we've spoken a little bit about the result tonight. Are you confident that this third or fourth place will be secured in the next 2 games?
I think if we play like we did tonight, I wouldn't say I'm confident. Definitely not. I think Palace didn't punish us, and I think quite easily if we played against a different team, it could have been different. But yeah, I think we will get top 4. I mean, I was saying not long ago that I thought we could get 3rd, but I still think obviously that Leicester game is massive at the end of the season. And we've got to keep players fit ultimately. If Bruno or Pogba gets injured, then I do fear for our season. So it's all about rotation. We'll see what team we put out on Sunday as well for the FA Cup. But I do think we'll get top 4. But I wouldn't say I'm overconfident. I'm just trusting the players that we'll have enough quality to get through.
Well, Grizz has guaranteed that Manchester United will be in the top 4, so you know, he gets everything right.
Cheers, Grizz.
Take that with as much salt as you'd like. Grizz, United top 4, yes.
Sorted.
Okay, Harry, United top 4.
You're more confident than me.
Jammy Dodgers. I was going to say something else, but yeah.
Yeah, no, don't. Grizz, not Grizz. Harry, United top 4.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think there's enough. I think there's a slip up in Chelsea or Leicester there, and I think United will win the last 2, including Leicester away. But Ben, United top 4, yeah.
Sorry to sit on the fence here, but I genuinely think that Spurs will basically decide it this weekend. If Spurs get a win against Leicester on Sunday, or even a draw, I think that makes a massive impact on what happens with the top 4. And I would back, if Spurs take points off Leicester, I'd back United to do it.
Thing is though, with a top 4 race at the minute, like Spurs will win and then we'll probably lose our next game. Like, that's the way that it's gone. It's just been horrible. Nobody seems to want to take the reins.
Yeah.
It has. Yeah, nobody seems to want it. So hopefully we can take advantage of that.
Well, the thing is, if Leicester lost by a goal and United lost or won by a goal, would I be right in saying to be level on goal difference going into the last game of the season with 3 points separating them?
I believe so.
So a Leicester 1-0 win would win it by 1 goal. So, you know, best of luck with it. That's all I've got to say. But look, before we finish up, and you've been brilliant with your time, all of you, I just want to look forward to the summer. Now, I know things are a little bit, you know, all over the place at the moment. Fans not in grounds, finances all over the place. How much money do people have? How much do they not have? is the market there to buy? Is the market there to sell? But Harry, I'll come back to you. Looking to this summer, what would you like to see Arsenal do? Question one. And number two, if there was one player out there that you'd like to sign realistically, who would it be?
In terms of what I'd like to see Arsenal do, I'd like to see them go out and get another central midfield player. Maybe that is in the shape of signing Dani Ceballos on a permanent deal. He's shown a hell of a lot of improvement under Mikel Arteta in the last, since the restart. He's probably been Arsenal's best player. So he's been really, really good and really impressive. So be interesting to see if we can get a deal done with Real Madrid for that. The rumours are that they want around about £22.5 million for him, which is reasonable. But again, we don't know where the finances are at. Obviously, at all times, you want to see Arsenal improve their defence. But given that they've given David Luiz another year, given that they've signed Pablo Mari as well, who's of course out injured at the moment, I that is a sign to me that Arsenal are not going to go out and look for a centre-back this summer. We've also got William Saliba coming in, who we brought last summer and we loaned him back to Saint Etienne. He's going to play the French Cup final with them, and then he's going to come and join up with Arsenal. So I'm not confident that they'll do anything along the back line. I think they brought Cedric in, they brought Marie in, they've given Luiz an extension. There's talks of Mustafi getting an extension as well. So I think that position, we can forget about it. Middle of the park, again, like I said, if we can keep Ceballos, that would be great. If we can't, though, I do think Arsenal will look for an alternative. In terms of the one player that I'd like to see Arsenal be able to go and get, he's a player actually that Arsenal have been heavily linked to, and that's Thomas Partey. I don't think necessarily that Thomas Partey is going to bring the kind of creative spark that maybe we've been lacking a bit in recent times, but I do think he brings a lot of industry to the team, and that can then allow others to push on. And if you had a midfield with Partey in it and Ceballos in it, even you'd maybe see him be able to have that license and roam a bit more forward and start to create. So look, much of what Arsenal do, pretty much everything that Arsenal do, is going to be dependent on who goes out of the door. And that's really, really important. And until that comes and that's clearer in terms of who we will be moving on, then I think it's really tough to see Arsenal go out there and spend significant amounts of money. I just don't think it's going to happen.
The centre-half stuff, the way you've explained it, is you're absolutely correct, I think, in the way you say it, but it's absolute insanity from Arsenal Football Club to be carrying on with this centre-half stuff that they continue to do for year on year, in my opinion. Centre-back would be the first place I'd be buying. I'd be putting all my money on it. And I'd make
but they have paid £27 million for a centre-back that's coming in this summer. So it's, yes, it's not ideal, but I just think they've looked around and they've thought, well, we don't have the funds to go out and get a £30 million centre-back this summer. So it's cheaper for us to extend Luiz's contract, for example. Pablo Mari's coming in for 11 million, whatever it was. So I think they're just trying to patch that up for the time being, rather than going out and spending sort of a mid-value on someone that a year down the line isn't going to be suitable again.
Yeah. Owen Bork in the chat suggests that you make a bid of £40 million plus £1 for Luis Suarez. Of course, going back to that famous summer when they done that, and we weren't too sure what they were smoking at the Emirates. Ben, Spurs, what way do you see it going this summer? Can you see many ins, many outs? And is there one player that, takes your fancy with regards to coming into Spurs this summer?
Yeah, I'd love to see a central defensive midfielder, to be honest. Be really keen to see Højbjerg from Southampton. I think would be a really good signing.
Rumour, Everton have made a bid for him.
Yeah, I just want to see basically Spurs provide a platform for their attacking players to go and play. I think we haven't had a properly strong defensive-minded central midfielder since peak Wanyama maybe, or peak Dembele. So for me, CDM is top of the list, and I think we probably will go out and do some business. I think, despite what everyone's saying, I think we will make a couple of signings this summer. And
is there one name you really want?
Other than Højbjerg, I think the reality is that probably there's not a huge amount of top central defensive midfielders about. Partey was the other one that I think he would be absolutely superb for Arsenal, but I think he'd be brilliant for Tottenham as well. just so physically good and such a good stopper, but also can manage transition really well. I think he'd be an excellent option as well for Spurs.
Or start banging down Leicester's door for Wilfred and Ndidi and see what
Yeah, I
happens
mean,
there.
the thing is with Leicester is that the way that they're set up, any of their key players or any of their top players,
Big
they will
bucks.
literally charge the earth for. And I mean, you're looking at Tielemans, Maddison, Ndidi, even Chowdhury, like really, really good.
Chilwell.
Cresswell is another one. Sorry, Chilwell. Sorry, you Chelsea will have to pay what 40 million for him plus. And you think, like, I don't see many teams that are able to get into that sort of like bidding war with Leicester.
Sophie, Manchester United.
I think
I don't know if a lot will depend on whether they get Champions League or not. But what do you want to see this summer, and what player would you like to see?
we've been linked constantly with Sancho, and I think I'd love to see Sancho play on our right side, obviously with Martial and Rashford playing as well. I know Greenwood's been playing there at the minute, but Greenwood is very much still an up-and-coming player, and I know he's progressing a lot, but I very much want to keep him grounded and don't want to get overhyped too early. We see that happen all the time with English players. But yeah, I think Sancho would be a great addition for us, having him on the right-hand side. I still think we need someone to replace Matic in that holding role. Fred, I don't think he's quite disciplined enough to do that. We need someone who's going to let Pogba and Fernando's obviously be free. So I think that's an interesting one. But I also think a centre-back. I don't fully trust Lindelof at the back. I think he can be a bit vulnerable in the air, and I've been with Koulibaly. Ake was spoke about recently as well. But I'd be happy with Sancho on the right hand side and then a centre back. That's what I'd be satisfied with. And I've been linked with Jack Grealish as well. But I'll be honest, I'm still very much undecided on Grealish. I think he will add quality to the squad because I think we've seen that our backup is not good enough. But I don't know. Grealish for me, he looks a bit frustrating at times. I know he's carrying the Villa team. We were very poor, but if he's happy to come to United and be a rotation player, then again, I'd be happy with Jack Grealish. But like I mentioned earlier, I think Ollie's got to be careful with the characters he gets in and the balance of the squad. So, but Sancho for me is a must.
Okay. Of course, have been heavily linked with Sancho.
Constantly.
Yeah, it's every day at this stage, but we'll have to wait and see. Grizz, Liverpool are terrible. They've gone off the boil. They've burnt out. All these sort of superlatives are being used for Liverpool over the last couple of weeks, despite the fact that ever since Willian scored that penalty against Manchester City, Liverpool stopped caring about playing football, in my opinion. What do you want to see from Liverpool this summer, and what one player would you like to see?
Thiago, Thiago, yeah. Just bring in Thiago, and I'm happy with bringing a young, like Jamal Lewis for cover for Andy Robbo, and we're good to go again. We'll show everyone how we're already on our beaches and our holidays in our heads and our minds. Some creativity in central midfield. An under study for Robbo, and we won't get the expensive, or not the expensive, but the high profile attacker that we want. I think we're going to hold fire for that till summer, and that's it really. I think we'll be good to go. So 2-3 signings, and we're ready to rock and roll again.
Okay, as always, Grizz, I ask you for one and you give me 3, but that's how we work.
It's fluid.
By now. It is fluid, and you like to add context. Everybody knows that. Listen, that has been the LFC Daytrippers for tonight. It's been very, very interesting to talk to you all about your clubs and where they are and where they are going. We will do this again at some stage, I'm sure. Sophie, thanks a million. Ben, thanks a million. Harry, thanks a million. Grizz, thanks a million. I've been your host, Gav. Yeah, over and out.